She was Adam's first wife, a woman who rejected submission and chose freedom, paying the price of eternal damnation. Although Christianity remained almost entirely silent about her, she became a powerful figure in Jewish folklore, inspiring an alternative and much darker vision of humanity's beginnings. This is the story of Lilith, one of the most terrifying beings in Hebrew folklore. Although most people associate Adam's wife with Eve, there is a much more provocative legend about another female figure that has circulated in Jewish folklore for centuries. The most complete and influential version of this story can be found in a medieval text called the Alphabet of Ben Sira, dating to the 10th century CE. It is not a canonical scripture, but rather a collection of stories and proverbs, sometimes with a satirical tone. This is where the story of Lilith comes from, Adam's rebellious first partner. According to this source, the history of humanity began differently than what is described in the well-known book of Genesis. After creating Adam, God decided to give him a companion. However, he didn't create her from a rib, like Eve later on, but from the same dust as Adam. This method of creation was the root of the conflict. Lilith, aware of her origin, considered herself equal to Adam. The conflict centered around the issue of dominance, symbolically shown through their sexual relationship. Lilith refused to take a submissive position, arguing that since they were made from the same substance, they had equal rights. This idea was unacceptable in a patriarchal culture. The symbolism of this scene goes far beyond sexuality. It touches on the fundamental question of power and decision-making in a relationship. In an ultimate act of defiance, Lilith spoke the sacred, unutterable name of God. Knowing this name gave her great power. She rose into the air, grew wings, and escaped from the Garden of Eden. She fled to the Red Sea, believed to be the dwelling place of demons. There, she was said to join with Samael, the prince of demons, and give birth to hundreds of demonic children every day. Adam turned to God, complaining about his wife's escape. In response, the Creator sent 3 angels, Senoi, Sansenoi, and Samangelof, to bring Lilith back to Eden. The angels delivered a divine ultimatum. If she returned, she would be forgiven, but if she refused, 100 of her children would die each day. Lilith rejected the offer, consciously accepting her fate. However, she made a vow that would forever shape her image. From that moment on, she would harm human newborns, becoming especially dangerous to boys until their 8th day of life, and to girls until their 20th. At the same time, she made a pact with the angels. She promised not to harm any child protected by an amulet bearing their names or images. This legend gave rise to one of the most enduring Jewish protective practices. For centuries, amulets were placed over the cradles of babies and on the doors of houses to protect against the harmful influence of the demon. These rituals reflected the deep fear of high infant mortality, which was common in ancient and medieval times. After these dramatic events, God decided to create a new companion for Adam. This time, he made her from Adam's rib, emphasizing the woman's dependence on man and avoiding the mistake that led to Lilith's rebellion. Eve was meant to symbolize submission, obedience, and harmony, becoming the archetype of a woman subordinate to man. In canonical biblical texts, the name Lilith appears only once, and even then, in an unclear way. In the book of Isaiah, there is a description of the desolate land of Edom, cursed by God, which becomes a home for wild animals, monsters, and demons. In this context, a being is mentioned by the Hebrew word Lilith, said to find rest there. The term is translated in various ways across Bible versions, often as night demon or screech owl. Although Lilith is best known today through Jewish midrashim, her origins lie in ancient Mesopotamia. In Sumerian and Babylonian mythology, there were demons known as Lilu, male, and Lilitu, female. These figures didn't have detailed personal stories, but they were seen as dangerous desert spirits responsible for infertility, miscarriages, and infant death. Some scholars directly link Lilith to the Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh, in which the prologue describes the Hulupu tree inhabited by a demonic female being. However, the most striking artifact depicting this figure is the famous Burney relief, dated to around 2000 BCE. It shows a naked, winged woman with bird-like talons, standing on 2 lions and flanked by owls. In Jewish folk tradition, Lilith appears as a night demon, a dangerous and deceptive being. She was believed to pose a particular threat to pregnant women and newborns, with the power to cause miscarriages and sudden infant death, especially in the first days of life. Because of this, various protective measures were used in homes, such as hanging amulets with the names of angels, lighting candles, and keeping night watch over the child. These practices reflected a deeply rooted fear of infant mortality, which for centuries was a very real danger. Lilith was also seen as a threat to men. According to belief, she would appear in their dreams in a seductive form, trying to tempt them into sin. It was said that from such unions, Lilith would give birth to her own offspring, demonic beings called Lilith, who would continue her mission of spreading chaos. In the 20th and 21st centuries, the myth of Lilith experienced a remarkable revival, becoming a powerful symbol for feminist movements. A figure demonized for millennia because of her independence was reinterpreted as the first rebel, a woman who refused to live in a man's shadow and chose to define her own fate. Modern interpretations emphasize her courage, strength, and refusal to submit to patriarchal norms. Her escape from Eden is no longer seen as betrayal, but as an act of self-liberation. The story of Lilith has become an allegory for the fight for women's equality, for the right to their own voice, sexuality, and identity. She is the patron of those who reject roles forced upon them and seek their own path, even if it leads to exile and condemnation by society. For centuries, Lilith has fascinated artists and creators, both in the past and in modern times. In painting, Dante Gabriel Rossetti portrayed her in Lady Lilith as a beautiful, narcissistic woman brushing her long, flowing hair. Meanwhile, John Collier's 1887 painting presents her nude, wrapped in a serpent, emphasizing her dark, demonic nature and strong ties to the biblical Garden of Eden. Lilith also appears in literature. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe included her as one of the witches in Faust, while George MacDonald, in his 1895 novel Lilith, reimagined her as a complex character, both a destroyer and a redeemer. On television, Lilith is often portrayed as a seductive demon, but also as a symbol of female strength and independence. In Supernatural, she appears as the first demon created by Lucifer, a powerful and ruthless antagonist to the main characters. In the series Lucifer, she is shown as a 12,000-year-old being who gave up her immortality of her own free will, believing that life only gains meaning through its end. Lilith's image is also present in video games, where she often symbolizes chaos, power, and sensuality. In Blizzard's Diablo series, she appears as the mother of the Nephilim, hybrid beings born of angels and humans. Lilith also appears in the Darksiders game series as a powerful demoness who tries to manipulate death into resurrecting her offspring. Her actions are part of Lucifer's broader plan to disrupt the balance between heaven, hell, and the human world.